Welcome to the State of Affairs podcast. After 15, 20 days, we have resumed this podcast series, and I am being joined by Anima Puri. She is an assistant professor at Manav Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies. The topic for today's podcast is narco-terrorism, and we'll be just trying to understand as much as we can from her. First of all, I'd like to welcome her on this podcast.
Thank you so much, Mehraj, for having me here. It is an equal honor for me too. Thank you so much.
And I forgot initially to wish all the viewers Happy New Year. This New Year has been, quite interesting given the way we are structured at our places and different expectations that we have with this New Year. And apart from that, individually, this podcast is being sponsored and powered by the Study Box Tuition Center, which is located in the main town, Kupwara. You can just Google through and reach the office any which way you can on the social media or by a call. So that having been said, we'll rush down to the session that we are expecting. We'll be having a conversation on narco-terrorism. First of all, just draw us a landscape, Anima, of the entire narco-terrorism thing, because most of the viewers will be students and scholars. Over to you for this.
Sure. So basically, narco-terrorism refers to the nexus between the narcotics and terrorism. Narco-terrorism is basically the involvement of different terrorist organizations and insurgent groups in drug trafficking, and it has become a major problem with international implications. When we look at the word narco-terrorism, the word was first used in the United States of America when drug smugglers in Bolivia, Colombia, and other Central American countries organized the illegal trade as a profession and ran a parallel government. So these countries produced enormous quantities of cocaine and cannabis. As a matter of fact, this region depends upon the cultivation and production of cocaine and cannabis. And besides being a neighbor, the United States is the biggest market for narcotics. The growing population of drug addicts compelled the US government to respond to this situation. Its realization, however, came quite later when President Reagan decided to fight against the leftist movements in Latin America countries during the 1980s. So basically, narco-terrorism was the major issue, became the major issue in the 1980s. So it was that during that period. So when we talk about narco-terrorism, it is basically the nexus between the narcotics, which relates to the drugs, and terrorism.
And what's the current state of narco-terrorism when we talk about global trends and the entire discourse on narco-terrorism? Why do you see it at the global landscape?
So basically, it is quite related to security. When we talk about the narco-terrorism, it is closely linked to narco-trafficking. So narco-trafficking is basically the phenomenon which started as an organized cross-border crime, which has now emerged as a threat to the nation states because of its diabolic alliance with terrorist groups. And if we see the Golden Crescent, that is the largest producer of illicit opium, Afghanistan and Pakistan alone shared nearly 6,000 metric tons of the total illicit population in 1999. So it is a matter of serious concern to India because these drugs are a major source for funding. Pakistan sponsored terrorism in the country. And when we talk about India, India is the only legitimate supplier of opium to the international pharmaceutical industry, which generates huge revenue from the export. So the economy of Pak-Afghanistan frontier, when we talk about, is dependent on the production of poppy and cannabis. The drug money is being floated in unorganized but systematic manner into the Indian money markets, thereby damaging our financial institutions. Therefore, the illicit drug trafficking from the neighboring countries, it threatens both the polity and the economy of the country.
Let's draw back for a while in order to understand the broader term of narco-terrorism. How has it got associated with the security? Because this is for the students who have actually muddled through all this jargon of concepts and things associated with the term narco-terrorism. Where does the security dimension come to it when it comes to narco-terrorism?
Sure, Mehraj. When we talk about the narco-terrorism, when we see the terrorism in India, since the sources of terrorism in India lie beyond the domestic frontiers. It drives us to learn that the growth of illicit narcotics trade in the neighboring countries, which funds terrorist activities in India. So, as a matter of fact, Afghanistan and the northwestern frontier province of Pakistan are the biggest producers of opium in the world, which produce huge sums of money. So, sponsoring terrorism is a very expensive affair, and money is required for killing, kidnapping, and sabotaging. And it doesn't come through proper channels. It comes through illegal and unofficial channels. The market value of the narcotic drugs is much higher than that of consumer products in the world. It fetches voluminous, huge amounts of money, and that too in hard cash. For instance, 1 kilogram of heroin from the Golden Crescent that costs approximately 1 lakh rupees in South Asia, it fetches about crores of rupees in US market. So we can see that it is because of the enormous money involved in the illicit drug trade that terrorists have established links with drug traffickers, smugglers, and underworld dons to meet the expenses for operating terrorism.
For a while, let's get back to this golden crescent thing, because this is the source of what actually the narco-terrorism floats from and stems from. It's for the neighboring countries and at the global level also. There have been instances where this has been calculated as a security threat when it comes to narco-terrorism. Tell us more about this golden crescent, and what are the stakes for India in the entire thing?
Yes, so basically, when we talk about the Golden Crescent, it is the major source from where we get the Hawala money. When we talk about the Hawala money, that means the money which comes from there, which comes as a white, which is produced because of the drugs that are involved there. The money that is produced there, that is used as a black money in India, and that to fund the terrorist activities here. So that's what I said before, that when we talk about Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Golden Crescent, that is the biggest producer of the opium in the world. So these issues are very centric to the regional politics of South Asia and security environment of India. Few years ago, when we talk about the state of Jammu and Kashmir, we there was an instance wherein on the national highway in Udhampur, a Maruti car got stuck, and the driver of the car, instead of getting to the garage or getting the car repaired, instead he took out the cylinder from the car, and he started taking the cylinder out of the car and moving towards the outside the national highway. So that brought into the suspicion of few of the security personnel who were deployed on the national highway, that if some person will have its car stuck up in the national highway, on the national highway, that person would try to get the car repaired, instead take out the cylinder, which costs merely hundreds of thousands of rupees, right? But car is a big entity. But then there was a higher official who intervened in this manner and called the person to the nearest police thana, and then it was intervened, and then the cylinder now it was a cylinder, it was something suspicious. So they called the carpenter, and this cylinder was opened up, and then in that lakhs and crores of rupees were stored in that. So basically, he was taking the Hawala money which had come from Pakistan, and he was going to give to some political party or some terrorist organization, whichever the nexus was, for the conduction of the terrorist, for the operation of the terrorist activities. So that is the major concern these days.
We'll come back to the research on J&K and the narco-terrorism, but for a while, let's again focus on the South Asian dimension of this narco-terrorism. What are the social costs when we say that it is actually used by the non-state actors in order to exploit the situation and use it against a particular country for its demographic dividend, and a particular bracket of population is involved in drugs, in narco peddling also, we can say that. What about that? What are the social costs of this entire thing?
So before starting to talk about that, I'll talk about what are the constituents of narco-terrorism, and then I'll draw the line of the socio-economic dimension of that. So when we talk about the narcotics and terrorist organizations, they are both criminal in the eyes of international law. When we talk about criminals, terrorists, or narcotics traffickers, they both emphasize on the secrecy and the concealment from the law enforcement officials. That is very essential for them to survive as an organization or as an individual members. Moreover, due to the criminal character of these activities, organizations usually are forced to operate in the more murky part of the society that even comes in contact with sharing a common turf. So also the structures of narcotic trafficking groups and the traffic terrorist organizations are very similar. The use of widespread cells comprised of few individuals who operate in different areas of the country, like they run the day-to-day operations. This cell structure also represents a shared concern by both the entities to prioritize the security, since the use of a cell structure significantly limits the information available to the officials, and they change their locations and it is very difficult to get hold of them. And in addition to the common structures and interests, cooperation between the terrorist and narcotic organizations can also be based on the principles of mutual gain. Largely, when we see these organizations require the goods and services, and they can be accessed by trading or even sharing the resources between the organizations. And when I talk about the socio-economic dimension, obviously the youth of the country is majorly getting affected, and this should be stopped at the moment, because when we talk about the Golden Crescent, when we talk about the different states that are involved, basically the border states are the major ones that are getting exploited by this drug menace. It can be the bordering states of Jammu and Kashmir, it can be Punjab, Rajasthan, Assam, Nagaland, Manipur, and other states. All these are the youth, the young population. They indoctrinate them, they change their mindset and attract them towards this thing because it earns a lot of money. When we talk about the drug trade, it gives a lot of money. So they catch hold of the young population, the people who are in the teenage groups, and for the money, they lure them for the money, and then that's how they get involved in these things, and their whole future gets spoiled. So I would say that because before our youth gets distracted by this, gets demolished by this, we should control this menace and we should ensure proper mechanisms through which we should fight the cause.
There are also there must be a global framework. I am not aware of that. Is there any legal framework against this narco-terrorism, and what are the provisions of that, if there are any, and what are the prospects for any country or for any collaboration or consensus of the countries at the global level in order to face this menace of narco-terrorism?
Absolutely. When we talk about the United Nations General Assembly first had adopted this convention against the recruitment, use, and finance and trading of mercenaries in 1986. Need to trace the source of funding of terrorism became very clear then. Then it was around December 1989 that this convention was approved without a vote, and the signatories, the countries who were signatory, they had to sign that they should not employ, finance, or train mercenaries. Additionally, the General Assembly raised awareness of this growing affiliation of the drug traffickers in 1994. Then finally, in 1999, the UN General Assembly had adopted the International Convention for the Suppression of Financing of Terrorism with a vote in the remembrance of these resolutions, that we have to fight this menace, and that's how it got installed. So the United Nations has already been putting the mechanisms, has putting in the reinforcement across the world that we should find a solution to fight the drug menace. But when we talk about the particular states, I can give some examples. For example, my research paper that I recently published was on narco-terrorism in the state of J&K, the emerging trends. So I have done a detailed study on that topic because drug trafficking is such a huge, vast topic that there's so much literature, so much going around that we would require some time to get to the crux of the matter. But when we talk about the state of Jammu and Kashmir, there was an operation called Sadbhavna that was launched by the Indian Army. The Indian Army had established the de-addiction counseling centers for young people who are drug addicts as a part of Operation Sadbhavna. And the second project under Operation Sadbhavna was also to create awareness. It is very crucial to educate the individuals about the dangers of drugs. The Indian Army has periodically host drug awareness camps across the villages, across the cities, so that people should know the negative impacts of the drugs and the unpleasant side of the drugs also.
When we talk about coming back to the important segment of this podcast, is that the Indian stakes, because in the entire South Asian region, India is the worst affected country by this narco-terrorism, given the way our proximity with neighboring countries like Pakistan, like Afghanistan, and also in the entire region of South Asia. We are just watching that it is used as a means by the non-state actors to actually kind of foment trouble in the inside the borders of India. What are the prospects for India? What is the Indian way of looking at it, and what are the legal mechanisms, and what are the security dimensions of it? Because given the way the narco-terrorism has been one of the main security threats to the bordering states, especially, how do you look at it at this issue?
See, first of all, at the central level, we should have a de-addiction policy to combat the drug pandemic, because we see that J&K was the first union territory of India to implement a drug de-addiction policy, in which the administration should give a better de-addiction system, should talk about there should be availability of anti-narcotic structures through which timely review should be done. There should be camps which should be there across the villages, across the cities, so that people are made aware and people are made alert about what is happening, because it is a top priority given the neighboring states that we have to keep a monitoring committees across the divisions across the different cities. We should also have infrastructure, better staffing levels. We should have committees who evaluate and regularly visit the cities and the villages to see whether the de-addiction clinics are working at a fine level or not. And when we talk about the recommendations, first of all, our military intelligence is required to keep a very hawk's eye on the terrorist activity and thwart their objectives. We should locate the financial and funding sources. The economic intelligence is also very necessary. When we talk about the trade, funding, and transportation of illegal drugs that need to be quickly monitored and stopped, in this, enforcement directorate has a very important role to play, because it has to get involved when we talk about the money laundering and the violations of the foreign exchange laws. When we talk about the UAE and the Pakistan operated Hawala networks, it may be destroyed by the enforcement directorate. Then we should also have an anti-drone technology, wherein we should not, like, there are few states who have stopped the use of drones. It is very important that we stop the policy, this drone technology, because it also helps in the transportation of drugs from one place to another, and also to keep an eye of the youth of the country, and also to know what is happening around. So we should follow the measures.
And what about what about your research paper on the narco-terrorism in J&K? Because that's the main area that we have to talk about. What were your findings in the entire research paper?
So basically, I worked on the hypothesis that the drug trafficking funds terrorist activities. It needs logical explanation, and the logic is based on certain facts and figures that we've been talking about. First of all, the illicit drug trade is very essential to the economies of the nations that produce narcotics. Where narcotics is produced, they want a system wherein the money gets the to and fro of money. So in spite of a strong legislation, the illicit drug trade would persist until they have a different type of economy. So the countries that are majorly relying on the narcotics trade to be their funding purpose, they should have a different type of economy, and the governments of that country should focus on that. First of all, and second of all, that large sums of money are required for terrorist operations, since it is very challenging to obtain that much amount of legitimate and authorized source. Terrorists turn to drug cartels and underworld dons for assistance. So we have to short that down. When we talk about the situation in J&K, like you rightly asked, So I feel that the tight-lipped mullahs are worsening the situation there. First of all, we should not preach any sort of thing which calls for drug consumption. The government of Jammu and Kashmir has always responded to the unprecedented spike in drug consumption by stepping up the security measures and opening different de-addiction drug camps. One is majorly based in Srinagar and other is based in Jammu. Each district should also have a professional counseling center wherein a person who gets into the drug menace should come and counseling should be given so that one can come out of that. Now, when we talk about the religious leaders or the person who are preaching the drug in their meetings, also they should preach the youth in the religious meetings not to confront drug abuse and should be very serious about it. One should not preach the drug about the drug, one should not preach about spreading of drugs, and one should talk openly about the drug abuse in the schools, I would say in the teaching centers, or when we talk about in the religious meetings, because that spreads the word. If you keep quiet on a topic, that will lead to further complications. So we should regularly hold public lectures, workshops, seminars wherein the people, the children are well made aware of that what is right and what is wrong for them.
And is there any specific time frame that you had looked into the entire research? That was there a time frame for that from this year to that year you have actually tried to get to the most of the things?
So basically, my research paper was majorly, first of all, like I talked about this topic in this talk session also of ours, that basically the root cause of this had started in the late 1980s in Latin America and how US was getting affected in the Central American countries region. And then I have brought my studies to the late 1990s and what currently is happening. So majorly I have covered 3 decades, but I have chosen different years during that time. Like starting was in 1980s and spread was in the 1990s. And now how we are looking at, because obviously since the issue has been coming since long, now we have better mechanisms to cope up with this menace. So yeah, 3 decades I have looked into, but particular areas going into the historical aspect than the contemporary aspect of it.
Have you touched upon the socio-economic dimension of the narco-terrorism in J&K? Anything about that?
Yes, like I just mentioned that we should preach in the teachings, in the schools, where in the religious meetings, that how drug menace is also leading to the terrorism. It is leading to radicalization. It is leading to violence, which is changing the way of life, which is destroying the family lives, which is changing the social fabric, which is also leading to unemployment, and we are disrupting our future. People are having unending conflicts because of because of consumption of drugs. We can see that they have increased anxiety attacks. They are going into depression, boredom, because they don't know how to channelize their energy. They're into psychological stress. There is total lack of recreational activities. So basically, we have to work on these issues.
You joined us on a short notes, Anima, and I'm so much thankful for that. And I hope that we'll keep tapping you for more podcasts like this. Thank you for coming over.
Thank you so much, Mehraj. Thank you.